Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Lizzi Marriott. Lizzi Marriott, a 19-year-old college student, went missing on October 9, 2012, after attending her classes. Before leaving, she left a note for her aunt and uncle, Tony and Becky Hannah, with whom she was staying. In the note, Lizzi said she was visiting a friend and would return before midnight. However, she did not return that night or the next day. Her car was later found in the school parking lot, but she was nowhere to be found. The investigation into her disappearance eventually turned to the search for her body. Police discovered that a group of people were involved in her death. Lizzi became a favorite member of Tony and Becky's family, moving in with them to save on housing costs while she attended the University of New Hampshire. She has always had a passion for marine animals, which inspired her to pursue a career in marine biology. In the fall of 2012, Lizzi moved away from her parents, Bob and Melissa Marriott, in Massachusetts to start a new life in Chester. Despite the 2-hour drive, they remained close and kept in touch. Lizzi's gentle, kind, and sweet nature made her a lovable person, and her presence brought joy to those around her. Tony and Becky remember her warm greeting, "I'm home," which filled their hearts with love and happiness whenever she returned to their home. As Lizzi settled into her new life, she worked at Target in her spare time, where she quickly adapted and built a good reputation. Lizzi met 18-year-old Kate McDonald, and the two quickly became friends, often hanging out after work. One evening, Kate invites Lizzi to her apartment for dinner and a movie. Lizzi agrees. However, their plans for a quiet evening are disrupted when Kate's 30-year-old boyfriend, Seth Mazzaglia, joins them. Lizzi doesn't mind Seth's surprise appearance, thinking it would be more fun to have a friend. Moreover, her new acquaintances are interesting people related to the theater. And Seth graduated from the same university as Lizzi but majored in theater arts. With many of the same interests, the evening looks like it will be a lot of fun. However, Lizzi doesn't know that her decision to enter the apartment that night will be a fateful one, as she will never leave again. Lizzi's relatives wait until the next evening, thinking that she may have stayed overnight with a friend before going to college. However, when she did not appear on October 10th, her aunt and uncle became worried and contacted her parents. But her parents had no information about her whereabouts. After receiving the news, Lizzi's mother and father immediately drove to Chester, reporting her missing to the police along the way. The search for Lizzi involved not only the police and her relatives, but also her friends. To begin the investigation, everyone who knew her was questioned. Although her relatives were unsure of her whereabouts, her friends were able to provide some information. A friend named Nate Michael said he knew where she might be and pointed to Kate McDonald. The police took note of this and began to follow up on new leads. Meanwhile, it was discovered that there was no activity on Lizzi's bank account and her phone was turned off. This ruled out the initial possibility that she had been in an accident. The investigation took a significant turn when her car was found just a few days later. At the same time, Bob and Melissa Marriott announced a $10,000 reward for information about their missing daughter. After speaking with Lizzi's friends and acquaintances, the police discovered some surprising details about Lizzi's coworker, Kate, and her boyfriend Seth Mazzaglia. It was clear that the couple was not what they appeared to be in public. Seth was later arrested. Lizzi and Kate's acquaintances revealed that the two girls had been spending a lot of time together recently, but their personalities and attitudes towards life seemed different. Lizzi was known to be friendly and compassionate, while Kate was often described as reserved and rude. However, employees at the store noticed a change in Kate's behavior after she started dating Seth, suggesting that she had been influenced by his bad traits over time. She had undergone significant changes, losing her previous carefree and bubbly personality. Unbeknownst to them, she had also begun to distance herself from relatives who disapproved of her new boyfriend. The couple began dating when Seth was 17, and after she turned 18, they moved in together at Mel's apartment in Dover, New Hampshire. Police kept a close eye on the couple and conducted background checks but found nothing unusual. While studying the young couple's online profiles, officers discovered details about their personal lives. Seth and Kate had an unusual relationship. On a website, Kate, using the pseudonym Miss Scarlet, a vampire actress, posted an ad. She wrote that she and her partner were looking for a live-in maid. Required duties included cleaning the house, washing dishes, laundry, cooking, and being available for sex at any time. Kate also shared information about herself and her partner, describing their relationship as dominant and submissive, with the former giving orders and controlling while the latter completely submitted to his will. Kate had attached photos of herself in a Gothic style to the post. It was clear that their relationship was not based on love and mutual respect, but on humiliation and submission. The couple practiced a form of bondage, discipline, dominance, and submission, with Seth as the dominant partner and Kate as the submissive. This discovery led the police to strongly suspect that they might be involved in Lizzi's disappearance. On October 12, the police interviewed Kate and Seth. The police separated them to gather information more effectively. For 2 hours, Kate insisted that she had not seen Lizzi on October 9th. Then she refused to talk altogether. Seth, on the other hand, provided more details, confirming that Lizzi had been at their house that day. According to Seth, the evening involved watching movies, playing strip poker, and then having consensual sex with 2 women. During this intimate encounter, Seth claimed that he had tied the women up with rope, but the situation turned tragic, resulting in Lizzi's accidental death. Then, in a state of shock and fear of being misunderstood, he and Kate took the girl's body to Pierce Island and threw it into the Piscataqua River. They then went home. After an 11-hour interrogation, Seth took police to the location where he said he dumped Lizzi's body, reenacting the scene where he threw her off the cliff. He was later charged with murder on October 13th. The news of their daughter's death was devastating to Melissa and Bob Marriott. A candlelight vigil was held in Lizzi's memory that same day. At the vigil, Bob expressed his gratitude to those in attendance and hoped that the collective prayer would bring Lizzi peace. He described his daughter as an angel who had gone to heaven. Her friend Nate, who was actively involved in the search for Lizzi, remembered her as always telling funny stories to lift the spirits or comfort others during difficult times. He sadly wondered if she would ever find the right words to comfort them in her current situation. However, Lizzi's parents refused to accept the circumstances of her death as Seth described. Her parents asked the police to find their daughter's body as soon as possible so they could say goodbye and give her a proper burial. The search for Lizzi continued, with the cooperation of volunteers and police. However, the river where Lizzi's body was dumped was subject to strong currents, and it is likely that she had drifted into the Atlantic Ocean. The investigation expanded to include a thorough search of Seth and Kate's apartment and the surrounding area. Police found that their apartment was unclean and very messy. They also discovered that Seth had an interest in occultism and black magic. Since no evidence was found in the apartment, forensic experts examined the surrounding area, including the trash cans. In one of the bins, they found a bag containing a sweatshirt, black leather gloves, and men's underwear. After an autopsy, underwear was found to contain DNA from both Seth and Lizzi, confirming their intimate relationship. Police also found a sweater that was identified by Lizzi's family as hers. On October 17th, Kate gave her statement after a period of silence. She described a get-together with Lizzi on October 9th. The evening began as a movie night but then turned into a game of strip poker. During the game, they became excited and decided to have sex, with all parties allegedly consenting. According to Kate, The interactions began with affectionate touches and kisses before Seth suggested tying Lizzi up with rope, an idea she agreed to. Kate even reenacted Seth tying Lizzi up with rope. Everything was going well, but suddenly Lizzi had a seizure. She began having difficulty breathing, and a few minutes later, she passed out. When Seth and Kate lifted the girl up, she stopped breathing. It all happened quickly and unexpectedly. Kate claimed that no one was responsible for what happened, it was an accident. However, a crucial testimony later emerged, shedding further light on the case. One day, a young woman came to the police station, claiming that she had important information about the Lizzi Marriott case. She asked to speak to the police officer leading the investigation. During the conversation, the woman introduced herself as Catherine Fish, Seth's ex-girlfriend. As she shared her story, she hinted that Seth was capable of murder. She revealed that, during their relationship, he had once confessed to her that in one of his fantasies, he had taken someone's life. Catherine and Seth met about 10 years ago. Initially, Seth appeared to be a charming and attentive man, showering Catherine with attention, flowers, and gifts. He was charming in conversation, and Catherine quickly fell in love with him. However, things took an unexpected turn during their first intimate encounter, when Catherine discovered that Seth enjoyed physical violence. Although Catherine was initially willing to explore new experiences as long as Seth remained in control, she soon became uncomfortable as Seth's behavior became increasingly cruel and aggressive. Seth would occasionally share his disturbing thoughts and fantasies with Catherine, which only made her increasingly anxious. One particularly unpleasant conversation led Catherine to a terrifying realization: Seth could be a danger to her. This fear was soon confirmed when Seth, in a fit of aggression, grabbed Catherine by the neck, squeezing despite her desperate pleas to let go. Catherine's life became increasingly uncomfortable after her boyfriend, Seth, brought home several different girls, claiming that they needed a third, long-term partner to spice up their relationship. Catherine's life became hell. She admitted that Seth scared her so much that she didn't dare to escape. After a few months, she finally got the courage to run away. Catherine miraculously traveled 1,000 miles to her parents' house, never to see her ex-boyfriend again. In May 2014, Seth appeared in court on charges including attempted murder. Several witnesses testified against him, including Kate McDonald, who was arrested 2 months after Lizzi's death on charges of obstruction of justice and obstruction of justice. While in custody, Kate had plenty of time to reflect on her actions and the person she was protecting. Initially, she and Seth maintained an active correspondence while she was behind bars. The pair shared romantic visions of escaping together and fleeing to a country without extradition laws where they could marry and start a family. However, their escape plan hit a snag. Seth convinced his soon-to-be-released cellmate, Ryan Bachman, to assist in the plan. Ryan was given access to Seth's bank account and instructed to withdraw money, buy drugs with the money, and then sell the drugs to increase his initial capital. The plan was to use the extra money to buy various items, including guns, 2 cars, explosives, and a boat. However, Ryan decided to use the money for his own purposes, and the police soon discovered the plan. Seth therefore abandoned his escape plan and sent Kate a letter, suggesting that they would meet in the afterlife, hinting at the possibility that death was not the end of life. Some interpreted this as a suggestion for Kate to end her life. Over time, Kate's thinking became clearer, and when the prosecutor's office offered her a favorable deal in 2014, she accepted without hesitation. The deal required Kate to give a truthful account of the events that occurred on the evening of October 9th in the apartment. In return, her potential 20-year prison sentence was reduced to 3 years. Kate said that after she started a relationship with Seth, she was terrified of him and did everything he told her to do. Over time, Seth took control of her life, suppressed her free will, and made her dependent on him. A month and a half before Lizzi's death, Seth sent her a text message, asking her to find another partner as soon as possible because he didn't want to be alone while she was away on a 10-day theatrical tour. However, Kate was unable to find anyone to replace her. Over time, Seth's messages became more aggressive, shifting from commands to threats. He warned her that if she didn't follow his instructions, she would face serious consequences. At the very least, Seth wanted her to bring a friend to spend time with so he could pursue his plans. To fulfill his request, Kate invites her friend Lizzi, as Lizzi has been to Kate's house before and trusts her. Lizzi is unaware that Seth planned this and is happy that she is the chosen partner, as he has seen her pictures before. To ensure that Lizzi will come without hesitation, Kate does not tell her that they will have Seth join them. Lizzi arrives at Kate's apartment on October 9th at 9 p.m. Initially, Kate and Lizzi socialize while Seth joins in later, creating a lively atmosphere with his jokes and interest in the girls. When they move on to watch a movie, Seth suggests a strip card game, which adds an intimate atmosphere to the scene. The game goes normally, but Lizzi is losing, so she strips in her underwear for another losing game. Seth suggested kissing Lizzi, but the girl refused, explaining that she had a boyfriend and that disgusted her. After a while, Seth asked Lizzi to be alone, and she replied no. In response, Seth angrily left the room, put on a pair of black leather gloves, and grabbed a rope. He then returned, sat down behind Lizzi, and quickly wrapped the rope around her neck. Lizzi was taken by surprise and had no time to react. Seth had strangled her without hesitation. He then desecrated the victim's body. During the whole process, Kate sat nearby, frozen in fear. She was afraid that she would be the next victim, so she did nothing to help poor Lizzi. Around 1 a.m., the couple put Lizzi's body in a suitcase after wrapping it in a tarp and some pollen. They transported the suitcase to Lizzi's car and drove to Pierce Island, which was located by the river. Once on the island, they took the suitcase to an observation deck and took the body out, throwing it over the cliff. After dumping the body, the couple cleaned up in the car, then drove to the school and left Lizzi's car in the parking lot. From there, they walked about 10 miles home. Kate later explained that she was very scared and shocked during the whole process. She later refused to testify against Seth because she was afraid he would hurt her. During the trial, the girl appeared to be in pain, crying continuously, but not shedding a single tear. Because of this, many in the courtroom doubted her sincerity. They believed that she might be a talented actress and that she could easily fake her pain. The defense took note of this and argued that the girl's emotional display was fabricated. Meanwhile, both the defense and the prosecution agreed that the couple disposed of Lizzi's body after she died. However, they disagreed on the circumstances surrounding the death. Seth's defense argued that the victim, Lizzi, died as a result of an accident during an intimate encounter. Kate's defense, on the other hand, claimed that the death was intentional, and asserted that Kate had been under great pressure from Seth, who isolated her from her family and friends and forced her into intimate relationships. This, according to the defense, had a significant impact on her mental state. The prosecution, on the other hand, focused on proving that the crime was an act of intentional homicide. They presented the discovery of the gloves as crucial evidence, which they alleged showed that Seth had tried to cover his tracks. According to the prosecution, Seth was aware of what he had done. The prosecution's witnesses also included Roberta Gherkin and Paul Hickok, acquaintances of the couple. It turned out that at 10:49 p.m., after Lizzi's death, Seth called them. He said he needed help and asked them to come. After 11 p.m., the couple went to Seth's apartment, where they witnessed a disturbing scene, Seth sitting on the bed next to a girl in lingerie. When Paul asked about the situation, Seth repeatedly said, "This time it's gone too far." Roberta discovered Kate curled up on the kitchen floor. Upon witnessing this, the couple urged Seth to call an ambulance and quickly left the scene. They chose not to intervene or contact the police to avoid any further trouble. Seth Mazzaglia, 32, was convicted of first-degree murder by strangulation and conspiracy on August 14, 2014. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. His co-defendant, Kate McDonald, 20, was sentenced to 3 years in prison. After her release in 2016, Kate lived a fairly private life, with many believing she had returned to her parents' home. Tragically, Lizzi Marriott's body was never found. Her parents, Bob and Melissa, created a memorial bench in their hometown to honor their daughter. While they accept that justice has been served in part through Seth's sentencing, they find it difficult to accept the leniency of Kate McDonald's sentence, claiming that their daughter will never return. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Zoe Hastings. Zoe Hastings was born on November 21, 1996 in Kansas, the oldest of 5 siblings, including 3 sisters and a brother. Zoe helped her parents take care of her younger siblings, willing to cancel any plans if her parents needed help. Her parents were very religious, so the family spent a lot of time at church. At some point, Zoe's family moved to Dallas, where she attended a high school specializing in the arts and creativity. This environment nurtured her passion for painting and encouraged her to participate in school theater productions. Outside of school, Zoe continued to pursue her creativity by working at a local art studio in Dallas. She also worked as a lifeguard at a community pool during the summer months. After graduating from high school, Zoe had the opportunity to attend some of the country's top universities. Instead, she decided to postpone her studies and focus on her church. In October 2015, at the age of 18, Zoe was preparing to go on a church mission trip and was looking forward to it. On Sunday, October 11th, she planned to attend a service where they would discuss the details of the trip. Zoe took the family car, promised her parents she would be home for dinner, and left home around 4:40 p.m. The church was only a few miles away, and her parents expected her to return around 6:30 p.m. However, as time passed and Zoe did not return home for dinner, her family began to worry. This was out of character for her, and they had not been able to reach her via text or phone call. They tried to contact her friends and family members, thinking she might have stopped by to visit, but no one had seen her. As their concern turned to alarm, her parents called the church, hoping to find an explanation for her absence. Instead, they were shocked to learn that Zoe had not attended the service. Her parents grew even more concerned and decided to contact the police. They called 911. But for some reason, the police did not come to their house, so her parents drove to the police station themselves, filed a report, and began searching for their daughter. Despite following the route from their home to the church several times, they found no trace of Zoe. The search continued throughout the night. When morning came, Zoe's mother remembered that her daughter's iPhone had a tracking app that could reveal her location. Using the app, they discovered that Zoe's phone was near a small creek, just a few hundred yards from the church. Her parents immediately went to the location. They were horrified to see a large number of police cars, as well as ambulances and emergency services. When they approached one of the police officers, they explained that they were looking for their daughter, and the officer informed them that there had been a car accident a few hours earlier. Police told her parents that a dog walker called the police after being alerted to the accident by a passerby. The passerby told the dog walker that there was an injured woman near the creek. The dog walker then ran to the scene, found the woman lying in a pool of blood, and called 911. The officer quickly identified the deceased as Zoe Hastings. They immediately realized that she had not died in an accident. It was clear from the first glance that she had been the victim of a murder. Zoe's body was found a few hundred yards from the partially submerged minivan in the creek. A significant amount of blood was found near her body, along with multiple cuts to her neck. Her skirt had been pulled up and her underwear pulled down, suggesting that the killer may have also sexually assaulted her. Zoe's parents attempted to approach their daughter but were stopped by police. After investigating, the police discovered some important evidence. Notably, all the doors of the minivan, except for the driver's side door, were locked. This detail suggests that the perpetrator may have driven or approached Zoe directly at the scene. A bloody knife, believed to be the murder weapon, was found by the police near the creek, near an embankment under the bridge. Zoe's smartphone provided important information that helped the police reconstruct the sequence of events. GPS data showed that she arrived at the creek at 5:01 p.m., just 20 minutes after leaving her home. It appears that she was killed shortly after arriving. In addition, the police also discovered that after leaving her home, Zoe made one stop. She went to a DVD rental service near the local Walgreens to return a movie. While forensic experts were examining the body, police decided to look for potential witnesses who were in or near the store at the same time as Zoe. After interviewing several people, they found two potential witnesses. One was Lester Clark, who worked at a nearby tattoo parlor. He had come into the store around 4:45 p.m. to buy cigarettes and saw a woman near the DVD rental area. He then saw her walk back to the parking lot and try to get into a white pickup truck. A man approached her, stopped her from opening the door, said something, and then the two got into the truck and drove away. When the police showed Lester a photo of Zoe, he said the woman looked similar. Although he found the scene quite tense, he didn't think much of it, as it didn't seem like anything bad had happened. The witness described the man as short, stocky, and African American. However, Lester was too far from the parking lot to notice any other features. Later, as it got dark, he saw the man walking toward the store alone. A second witness, Gary Whitman, a homeless man, reported a similar incident. At approximately 4:45 p.m., he was standing across the parking lot when he saw a woman approaching a white pickup truck. A man suddenly appeared from behind her, blocking her from getting into the vehicle. The man then showed the woman something he had taken from his pocket. The woman then got into the car and moved into the passenger seat, while the man got into the driver's seat and drove away. Gary described the suspect similarly to Lester. While police were interviewing witnesses, forensic experts made several important discoveries. A forensic pathologist examined the victim and found a small amount of male DNA, not enough for a full DNA analysis. This finding supported the theory that the perpetrator had sexually assaulted Zoe before killing her. A separate examination of Zoe's car did not find anyone else's fingerprints on the door or steering wheel. This was surprising, as witness testimony suggested that the suspect may have driven the victim out of the store's parking lot in her small car. However, police believe that the killer wiped the steering wheel and door handles after the crime to remove any evidence. Several hairs were found on Zoe's body, but they were too small for experts to extract a complete DNA sample. However, a breakthrough came when they tested a knife found near the crime scene. A DNA sample was found on the knife and uploaded to the FBI database, resulting in a match. The DNA belonged to Antonio Cochran, 34, a man with a lengthy criminal record that began as a teenager, including arrests for burglary, assault, and home invasion. In 2014, Antonio had a history of being suspected of multiple crimes. One notable case involved his girlfriend's 17-year-old daughter, who accused him of sexual assault. She reported that Antonio offered to drive her, but instead of taking her to her destination, he drove her to a remote wooded area. There, he threatened to kill her if she tried to escape and then attacked her. After his arrest, Antonio claimed that the encounter was consensual. The case went to trial, where the prosecution failed to present enough evidence to prove Antonio's guilt, resulting in a not guilty verdict. Police identified Antonio as the prime suspect after finding his DNA on the knife and arrested him. During questioning, Antonio repeatedly denied any involvement in the murder. To gather further evidence, police compared Antonio's DNA to hair and semen found on Zoe. However, the samples were too small to extract a full DNA profile. Police analyzed Antonio's smartphone and discovered a series of text messages that revealed his unstable mental state on the day of the murder. At 1:48 a.m. the day before Zoe died, Antonio texted a friend who lived with him, saying he was moving out and would never see her again. Later that day, at 2:07 p.m., he texted his ex-girlfriend to say that his stepmother had died. He mentioned that she had died right in front of him and that he was having a hard time coming to terms with the loss. In the following hours, Antonio sent 2 text messages to another woman, saying that he had spent the night drinking, driving around the city and crying. These were his last text messages before Zoe died. That evening, at 9:30 p.m., Antonio texted his friend again, expressing his confusion about what to do with his life and lamenting that things had gotten worse. The next day, Antonio sent another text to his ex-girlfriend, saying that his life was over and that she would soon find out why. A check of Antonio's browser search history showed that he had visited local news websites more than 30 times before his arrest, often checking the crime section. Notably, 5 of these visits were to read articles specifically about Zoe's case. Data from Antonio's smartphone provided another lead for police. Experts retrieved GPS data from his phone and discovered that at 4:34 p.m., his phone connected to a cell tower that covered the area of a store. This coincided with the time Zoe was there, but this data wasn't considered strong evidence as it only indicated that his phone was within a few miles of the tower. The police discovered that Antonio had started working at a grocery store just 3 days before the incident. However, he had not shown up for work on Monday, the day after the murder, without providing any explanation. Despite the long list of circumstantial evidence against Antonio, the only strong evidence was his DNA on the handle of the knife. However, such evidence is usually not enough to convict because simply holding the knife does not prove murder. For example, he could have used the knife in other situations and someone else could have used it to commit the crime. But the police could not find any other evidence, so they decided to proceed and take the case to court. The prosecution presented an account of the events that took place that day. According to their account, when Zoe returned to her car in the parking lot, Antonio approached her, pulled out a knife, and threatened her to get in the car. He then took control of the car and drove away. The prosecution's case also included text messages that Antonio had sent before the murder, which showed that he was distraught due to the death of his stepmother. According to police, Antonio had been drinking heavily when he decided to kidnap and attack Zoe. He chose Zoe only because she was in the parking lot at the time. Antonio drove to a secluded creek surrounded by trees, where he forced Zoe out of the car, attacked her, and stabbed her 6 times in the neck. He then tried to drive into the creek to hide the evidence. But it was only partially submerged. Antonio wiped the steering wheel and door handles to remove fingerprints before fleeing the scene. According to the first witness, a man resembling Antonio was seen walking back to the store's parking lot that evening. However, the defense argued that most of the evidence did not directly link Antonio to the crime. For example, a hair and semen analysis only showed that Antonio could not be ruled out as the source, but did not confirm his involvement. The defense also argued that the DNA on the knife did not necessarily mean that Antonio was involved in the murder. They suggested that Antonio could have come into contact with the knife in another situation, such as when he worked at a movie theater and had to collect items left by customers. Furthermore, if someone else had used the knife from the movie theater to kill someone, it would have been difficult for them to avoid getting Antonio's DNA off the handle. The defense questioned the credibility of Gary, a homeless man who was the second witness, because he had an active arrest warrant for violating the terms of his parole. The defense attempted to exclude his testimony, but the prosecution disagreed. They argued that Gary's voluntary contact with the police, despite orders from him, showed that he genuinely wanted to help. Gary said he was just trying to do the right thing, even though he knew he would be arrested. Antonio's attorneys attempted to establish an alibi for their client, claiming that he was helping a friend at the time of Zoe's murder. However, they failed to present substantial evidence to support this claim. The prosecution initially sought the death penalty for Antonio, but as the trial progressed, it became clear that the evidence was not strong enough to achieve that outcome. The prosecution subsequently dropped its request for the death penalty. After a lengthy deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict and Antonio was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Zoe's parents expressed their gratitude to the police and those involved in the trial for bringing justice to their daughter's case. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Mackenzie Lueck. Mackenzie Lueck was born on March 8, 1996. Her father, Gregory Lueck, worked in healthcare logistics and administration, while her mother, Diana, was a homemaker. She grew up in El Segundo, Los Angeles County, California, with an older brother and two younger brothers. Mackenzie attended El Segundo High School, where she was on the swim team and played water polo. She was a dedicated student with a passion for art, music, and animals. After graduating, she enrolled at the University of Utah, majoring in kinesiology and nursing. She was also involved in the Alpha Kappa Omega sorority. While at the University of Utah, she expressed her support for women's rights and later left one of the major political parties to join a third conservative party. Mackenzie works at a biotesting company in Salt Lake City. She recalls the days when she biked to the Pacific Ocean, wearing a bikini and sunbathing in the high desert. She plans to pursue a career in the healthcare field, is considering nursing or medical school, and is scheduled to graduate in May 2020. The Lueck family was typical, but everything changed on June 17, 2019, when Mackenzie returned to Salt Lake City after her grandmother's funeral. Early on the morning of June 17, around 2 a.m., Mackenzie texted her mother after landing at Salt Lake City International Airport from California, "Landed and love you, Mom." However, when Diana tried to contact Mackenzie again, she realized that her daughter's phone was turned off. Gregory also called Mackenzie, but it went straight to voicemail, leaving the Lueck family worried about her well-being. On June 20th, Mackenzie's parents discovered that her friends had not heard from her either. They reported Mackenzie missing to the Salt Lake City Police Department. Over the next 2 weeks, Mackenzie's family attempted to track her down from California. Members of Mac. Nzi's Alpha Kappa Omega sorority began searching for her in Utah. Together, they created a Find Mackenzie Lueck Facebook page to bring national media attention to the matter. Investigators are working to figure out what happened. They have video evidence showing Mackenzie at the airport. She was then taken by a Lyft driver to Hatch Park in North Salt Lake, about 13 miles from the airport. Investigators have also verified Mackenzie's cell phone information, confirming that she was at the park. Detectives have discovered that Mackenzie had been exchanging text messages with a stranger named Iola Ajayi. Mackenzie is believed to have met Iola through a dating website and agreed to meet. The last text message Mackenzie sent to Iola was at 2:58 a.m. Cell phone data showed that both Mackenzie and Iola were at Hatch Park, and at 2:59 a.m., Mackenzie's phone stopped transmitting location data, indicating that her phone was turned off. Detectives then tracked Iola's cell phone signal, leading them from the park to his home at 547 North 1000 West in the Fair Park neighborhood. Investigators determined that Iola's cell phone was at his home at 3:07 a.m., just 7 to 8 minutes after he picked up Mackenzie from the park. Based on this evidence, detectives decided to execute a search warrant at Iola's home because he was considered a prime suspect in Mackenzie's disappearance. During the search of Iola's residence, a neighbor reported a terrible odor coming from a gasoline-fueled campfire in Iola's backyard, next to a garage, on June 17th and 18th. Investigators impounded Iola's vehicle when they detected a strong odor of gasoline and found a red gasoline can in the trunk. They determined that Iola had purchased a similar can of gasoline at a local store on the morning of Mackenzie's disappearance, at 9 a.m. After Iola was arrested, investigators analyzed his cell phone records and located the phone in Logan Canyon, where Iola admitted to his attorney that he had buried Mackenzie's body on June 25th, between 2:30 p.m. and 4:30 p.m. Detectives conducted a thorough investigation of the area and discovered a disturbed dirt in a wooded area near a major road. There, they found the charred remains of a person. An autopsy conducted on July 3rd identified the body as that of Mackenzie Lueck. She had been bound with rope behind her back. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be blunt force trauma to the left side of the skull and ruled her death a homicide. On October 7, 2020, Iola was convicted of first-degree murder and third-degree indignity in connection with Mackenzie's death. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole and an additional 5 years in prison for the indignity to Mackenzie's body. Iola was also charged with kidnapping another woman he met on a dating app in March 2018. The victim turned herself in after Iola was arrested for Mackenzie's murder. On October 7, 2020, Iola pleaded guilty to second-degree sexual abuse in connection with that case and was later sentenced to 1 to 15 years in prison. Iola was charged with 19 counts of sexual exploitation of a minor. These charges arose in August 2019, after police discovered multiple images of child pornography on his computer during the investigation into Mackenzie's death. The images, allegedly depicting children between the ages of 4 and 8, were discovered on July 2. Iola pleaded not guilty on October 1, 2020, and the charges related to the obscene act were later dismissed. The tragic loss of Mackenzie Lueck has shocked her loved ones and the nation. Her bright smile, zest for life, and dream of making a difference were taken from her in a senseless way. Nevertheless, Mackenzie's loved ones have come together to remember and honor her life. Her sorority friends remember her as a shining light, always ready to help and encourage. Through her art, music, and love for animals, Mackenzie's spirit lives on. Her story serves as a reminder to be vigilant and cautious, especially when engaging in online dating services. But more importantly, it reminds us of the value of life and the importance of cherishing every moment. Rest in peace, Mackenzie Lueck. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Christy Schoen. Christy Schoen was born on September 3, 1976, in Madrid, Spain, to American parents who served in the United States military. Due to her father's military career, Christy spent her childhood moving between different locations in Europe. Her family eventually settled back in the United States. Christy began school in New Orleans, Louisiana, but her education was moved around frequently due to her father's military career. She briefly attended schools in Texas and Illinois before moving to Latin America, where she lived for several years. Such a nomadic lifestyle had its benefits, as Christy spoke multiple languages from a young age and had the opportunity to experience the cultures and traditions of other countries. However, during her teenage years, she faced challenges integrating into new groups and making friends in new places. This constant change helped her develop exceptional communication skills. As a result, she easily made friends with people from different backgrounds and gained a reputation as a kind, outgoing, and charming young woman. Christy was also an active and healthy person, participating in various sports from a young age, such as gymnastics, swimming, and kickboxing. After graduating, her family eventually settled in Beloit, Mississippi, where her father had retired from the military. This stability helped Christy form lasting friendships and discover new interests, especially cooking. Christy discovered a passion for cooking and spent a lot of time experimenting in the kitchen, creating dishes that were praised by everyone. Her passion for cooking motivated her to pursue further training, and she completed culinary courses to hone her skills. Christy's parents initially envisioned her becoming a professional chef, but she surprised them by showing a natural talent for acting. With a strong passion for the arts, she enrolled in an acting academy and moved to Los Angeles to pursue her dream. Upon arriving in Los Angeles, Christy discovered the many opportunities that were waiting for her. She used her intelligence and determination to establish herself in the industry. Her early experiences included appearing in commercials, performing on stage, and working as an extra or stunt double in major Hollywood productions. One of her first notable roles was a small role in the Terminator series, which required her to perform physically demanding stunts. Despite graduating from the Acting Academy in 2000, Christy has yet to secure any major or memorable roles. Despite her striking looks and obvious talent, she later decided to focus on her cooking and athletic skills. Christy gained widespread recognition after appearing on several popular culinary television shows. Her appearance on the Next Food Network Star placed her in the finals, but unfortunately, she did not win due to mixed reviews from the judges for her unique dishes. Despite this, Christy gained attention and built a significant following on social media, where thousands of people follow her life and culinary creations. She actively promotes healthy living, giving advice on proper nutrition and even developing her own exercise routines to maintain good fitness. About a year later, Christy launched a catering company that caters to events and sells prepared food products. What sets her business apart is her focus on healthy eating, with menus featuring her own unique recipes. Christy soon considered taking her business to the next level by starting a farm that grew healthy, sustainable produce. This would allow her to expand her catering services and continue her commitment to healthy eating. Additionally, she began teaching online nutrition courses and pursuing other projects in the field. Christy met Joseph Timothy Codd, also known as JT, in 2012 at a studio in Los Angeles. Joseph was a casting director working on a popular cooking show that Christy wanted to be on. They connected immediately. At the time, Joseph was nearly 7 years older than Christy, had been married before, and was in the process of getting divorced. He was captivated by the attractive blonde's beauty and charisma, and he began pursuing her romantically. Christy returned his interest, and they soon began a relationship. As their relationship grew, Joseph shared and supported his partner's ideas, and together they began working on their own farm project. Soon after, the couple decided to leave Los Angeles and move from Sun, California to North Carolina. To fund a new venture, they sold Christy's catering business, and Joseph sold his Hollywood home, using the proceeds to buy a large lot in Lear. Their new property included a spacious home and nearly an acre of land to make their dream a reality. Joseph continued his work with television channels, but switched to working remotely, while Christy focused on growing her blog about healthy living and nutrition. The couple had a very harmonious and loving relationship. After deciding to take their love to the next level, they got married in August 2014 in a lavish ceremony attended by hundreds of guests, including family members, friends, colleagues, neighbors, and fans. The couple was extremely happy and had big plans for their future. Just 3 months after their wedding, Christy became pregnant, and the couple was overjoyed and happy. During an ultrasound scan after the new year, the doctor confirmed that they were having a baby girl. Shortly after, Christy shared the news with her mother over the phone, mentioning that they had chosen the name Skylar for their child. The pregnancy went smoothly and everything seemed to be falling into place. When Christy was 5 months pregnant, troubling events began to occur. In the days leading up to her disappearance, Christy had been keeping her distant parents updated on her well-being through frequent phone calls, sometimes as long as an hour. However, on March 13, 2015, Christy's mother was unable to reach her daughter, but she initially didn't think much of it. The next day, Christy's mother tried to contact her and her husband, Joseph, again, but her calls went unanswered. Her attempts to reach her son-in-law were also unsuccessful. When both phones were turned off on March 15, Christy's mother became increasingly concerned. Since Christy and Joseph's families lived far away, they could not easily verify that everything was okay at their children's home. Therefore, Christy's mother decided to contact Cecily, a trusted friend of her daughter who lived in the area, to have her check the house. When she arrived at Christy's house, the friend noticed that both husband and wife's cars were parked outside, but the front door was locked. Despite knocking and shouting, there was no response. This, combined with the couple's phone being unreachable for 3 days, raised significant suspicion. Cecily saw the couple's dogs locked inside the house through a window, which was unusual as they never left them alone. Cecily walked around the house and discovered that the back door lock had been broken, indicating a possible break-in. She immediately called Christy's mother, who then contacted the police. Upon arrival, footage confirmed that the back door had been broken into and found a disturbance inside, indicating someone had been searching for something. Several valuables had been stolen, including a jewelry box belonging to the homeowner and items from a safe that had been broken into in the couple's bedroom. However, there were no signs of a struggle or evidence that the couple had been held or taken by force. The perpetrators had acted very discreetly, leaving no fingerprints or DNA. While relatives held out hope that Joseph, 45, and his wife, Christy, 38, who was 8 months pregnant, were still alive, seasoned police officers were more pessimistic. In the early days of the investigation, police were unable to find any significant evidence or clues. The missing couple, Christy and Joseph, had no enemies or conflicts with anyone else, making it a challenge to reconstruct what happened. The only clue they found was the couple's phones, which had been left at home and last used on March 12. Although the devices ran out of battery the next day, they still had records of incoming calls. Police decided to interview the couple's neighbors to see if anyone had noticed anything unusual recently. That's when an interesting detail emerged. A neighbor who lived across the street reported seeing another local resident, later identified as Robert Jason Owens, 36, throw a large bundle into a dumpster near the couple's home on the morning of March 15. The neighbor initially thought little of it, but after learning about the couple's disappearance, he decided to share the information with the police. However, by the time the police received the information, the trash had already been taken to the landfill. Before searching the landfill, the police wanted to speak with Robert. After investigating the information, the police learned that he lived in the same neighborhood, knew the couple, and was even considered a close friend of the family. Robert was a handyman who had helped Christy and Joseph when they first moved into their new home. At first, there was nothing suspicious about Robert's relationship with the couple. However, upon further investigation, other locals described Robert as a strange and unpredictable person, raising suspicions about his possible involvement in the couple's disappearance. Robert was called to the police station on March 16 for questioning about the missing couple. Initially, he denied any involvement in the couple's disappearance and claimed to know nothing about the bundle in question. Since he did not confess to anything and there was no solid evidence, there was not enough to charge him. Things changed that evening when police found a large bundle of belongings in a landfill. Inside were items from the missing couple's home. Police also found Robert's fingerprints and DNA on some of the couple's partially burned clothing. A blood-stained blanket and bedsheets from their home were also found in the bundle. This evidence confirmed police suspicions that Christy and Joseph were no longer alive. Those suspicions were dispelled when police searched Robert's home and found charred human remains in his wood stove. This discovery led to Robert being named a suspect in Christy and Joseph's deaths. Despite Robert's initial denials and inconsistent statements, he eventually confessed to the crime after hours of questioning. However, he claimed that the incident was accidental. According to Robert, on the evening of March 12th, he visited Christy and Joseph's home after getting stuck in the mud while trying to avoid hitting a dog with his car. He asked them to help push the car out, and Christy and Joseph agreed. While they were pushing the car, Robert claimed that he accidentally pressed the gas pedal instead of the brake pedal, causing the car to hit and run over the couple. Terrified by what he had done, Robert chose not to report the incident to the police, fearing that he would be charged with intentionally taking their lives. Instead, he attempted to cover up the crime. Robert claimed that he returned to Christy's home through the back door and took a blanket from the bedroom. Using these blankets, he wrapped the bodies of his victims, whom he was not sure were actually dead, and placed them in the back of his pickup truck. He then drove the bodies back to his home, where he dismembered them with a saw and a hatchet in the bathroom. To dispose of the remains, Robert burned the body parts piece by piece on his stove. However, instead of burning the victims' blood-soaked clothing and personal belongings, he packed them into a garbage bag and threw them in the trash, assuming they would end up in a landfill and never be found. After disposing of the bodies, Robert broke into Christy's home himself, stealing money and valuables to create the appearance of a burglary. Robert's brutal treatment of the victims' bodies, as well as his unsettling calmness in describing the incident, shocked even experienced police officers. Police discovered a saw and an axe at his home, both covered in blood, skin, and bone fragments from the deceased. What was particularly shocking was that Robert made no attempt to clean or conceal the tools of his crime, believing that he had nothing to do with the crime scene, having avoided leaving any evidence at the victim's home. A forensic analysis confirmed that bone fragments discovered in Robert's kitchen matched the DNA of the missing couple, prompting law enforcement to investigate further into the suspect's past. Robert Owens, a loner, was unmarried and had no children. He also kept his distance from his relatives. In 2000, Robert moved out of his previous home in Asheville, North Carolina, to settle on a newly purchased lot in Lewiston, where he later built a house. As police investigated further, they found a connection between Robert and an unsolved crime that had occurred 15 years earlier in Asheville. The case involved the unexplained disappearance of Zeb Wayne Quinn, an 18-year-old man who had been Robert's childhood friend. At the time of his disappearance, Zeb was a military trainee and a part-time employee at Walmart, living near Robert. On January 2, 2000, Zeb met Robert after his shift ended, and they planned to drive to Lewiston to buy a new car. However, Zeb never returned home. A few days later, his Mazda protege was discovered in another part of town, parked with the headlights on. A heart was drawn on the window in red lipstick. Although the car was recovered, Zeb was never found, and the car was also damaged and scratched with paint marks from another car. The last person to see Zeb was Robert, and his car also showed signs of damage. Notably, the scratches on Robert's car contained paint particles from Zeb's car. Robert told a strange and unbelievable story. As soon as they walked towards Lewiston, Zeb blinked at Robert to stop. Zeb said he had received a message on his pager and needed to use a public phone urgently. He asked Robert to wait and drove to the nearest gas station but returned after 10 minutes. Zeb appeared panicked, said their plans had changed, and drove off in an unknown direction, in the process crashing into Robert's car. It was also discovered that Zeb, who was romantically involved with a woman named Misty Taylor, whose ex-boyfriend, Wesley Smith, had threatened Zeb with harm if he did not stop seeing Misty Taylor. Wesley and Robert were questioned in the case, but due to lack of evidence, all three were released. Additionally, Misty and Wesley had alibis, while Robert did not. After investigation, a large sum of money and a pager were missing from Zeb's car. Police suspected the pager might be a false lead, and there was never any evidence that the message was sent. A phone call was made to Walmart the day after Zeb went missing from the Volvo plant where Robert worked, saying that Zeb would be out sick for a few days. However, the voice on the phone sounded strange to Zeb's coworkers. Despite further investigation, no new evidence or witnesses were found, leaving the case unsolved and Zeb listed as missing. 15 years later, Robert was again questioned as a suspect in Zeb's disappearance. The Zeb Wayne Quinn case was reopened in June 2015, but hopes of finding new information were low. When questioned again, Robert repeated the story he told in 2000, without providing any new clues. However, the police decided to conduct a thorough search of his property. The investigation led them to an unexpected discovery: a walled-off cavity inside a detached concrete slab at Robert's home. Inside, they found small, heavily charred human bone fragments, but unfortunately the remains were too damaged for DNA analysis to definitively determine whether they belonged to the missing Zeb. Interviews with a neighbor revealed new information that helped shed some light on the situation. An elderly man who lived nearby recalled a strange incident that occurred in January 2000. At the time, Robert had just purchased the land and was starting to build his house. One evening, Robert lit a fire that emitted a strong odor. The smell was so nauseating that it blew toward the neighbor, making him nearly sick. The neighbor even approached Robert to express his concerns about the smell. Shortly after the incident, the fire pit was filled with concrete, which seemed unusual. Robert mentioned that he had plans to build a small fountain at that location, but he never carried out the plan. The neighbor forgot about the incident until 15 years later, when the police came to the house. Eventually, Robert confessed to participating in a crime and told a new story. According to Robert, his uncle, Walter Owens, was the one who killed Zeb. Walter had been hired by Wesley Smith. Wesley apparently still had feelings for Misty, Zeb's girlfriend, and wanted to get rid of Zeb. Robert claimed that he was unaware of his uncle's plans and was only told to take Zeb to a secluded location. When they reached a wooded area, Robert's uncle ordered them to stop the car and forced Zeb to do so. When Zeb got out of the car, Walter shot and killed him quietly. After the murder, Walter instructed Robert to help him cut up Zeb's body, package it, and then burn it in Robert's yard that night. The body was then encased in concrete. Walter Owens could not be questioned, as he had died several years before Robert's chilling confession. Furthermore, no evidence was found at the crime scene, and Robert's story was not confirmed. Robert initially faced serious charges, including first-degree murder in the deaths of Joseph Timothy Codd and his wife Christy Schoen, fetal homicide, dismemberment, concealment of evidence, burglary, and robbery. These charges could have resulted in the death penalty. However, it was discovered that Robert had a long history of struggling with depression and psychosis, for which he was taking strong medication. His attorney used this information as the basis for his defense. In 2017, Robert Jason Owens accepted a plea deal, admitting to murder in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. As a result, he was convicted of second-degree manslaughter, dismemberment and burning of a body, burglary, and robbery. In total, he was sentenced to 59 years in prison. In 2022, Robert entered into another plea deal with the police, this time in connection with the case of Zeb Wayne Quinn. However, he only admitted to complicity in the murder and assisting in concealing evidence of the crime. He was sentenced to an additional 12 years in prison, on top of his existing 59-year sentence. During his sentencing hearing, Robert addressed the court and begged forgiveness from the victims' families. Despite his earlier admissions, Robert maintained that the killings were accidental rather than intentional. He blamed his mental health and the strong medication he was taking for impairing his judgment. The victims' families were not convinced by his claims of inadvertence. They refused to accept that the killings were accidental and instead believed that Robert had acted deliberately and with selfish motives. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Rachel Anderson. Rachel Anderson was born on January 28, 1994, in Warren, Ohio, to William Bill Anderson and Patricia Trish Anderson. She had a younger brother, John, who was a common family favorite. Rachel graduated from Warren Harding High School in 2012, where she was a member of the National Honor Society and excelled in soccer and volleyball. Unlike many of her peers, Rachel pursued an unconventional career. From a young age, she aspired to become a funeral director. To achieve her goal, she attended Youngstown State University, where she studied mortuary science. Her dedication earned her a spot on the list of top students, and she received a scholarship. Rachel later furthered her education at Cincinnati College of Mortuary Science, graduating in 2016 with a bachelor's degree in mortuary science. After becoming a member of the Ohio Funeral Directors Association, Rachel moved to Columbus to start her internship at Shaw Davis Funeral Home. She was deeply respectful of her work and felt a strong sense of duty to support grieving families. With her internship nearing its end, she hoped to secure a full-time position at the funeral home. However, her dreams and ambitions were tragically extinguished. Rachel's body was then sent to the morgue for a more thorough examination. The investigation began with interviews of key witnesses, and an autopsy was conducted to analyze the full extent of Rachel's severe injuries. The results showed that she had been strangled and stabbed. Specifically, she had a scalp laceration and skull fractures at the base of her head. The stab wound, located at the back of her neck, penetrated deep into her brain, damaging the left hemisphere. Rachel was killed with extreme force, as seen in the autopsy results where part of her skull was broken off. The autopsy also showed she was strangled using an electric blanket cord, which led to severe internal bleeding in her neck and chest area, as well as in her eyelids. Furthermore, the blood vessels in her eyes became filled with blood due to the strangulation. Additional forensic evidence indicated that Rachel was alive when the perpetrator restrained her, shown by bruises and red marks on her wrists and ankles. A DNA sample was discovered on the rope used to restrain Rachel and on her body. The coroner's autopsy results concluded that Rachel's death was ultimately caused by a stab wound to the head and neck, rather than strangulation as initially thought. The police interviewed several co-workers and Rachel's ex-boyfriend, who had an alibi for the time of the murder. Detectives returned to Rachel's apartment to conduct a search for evidence or clues that could lead them to the culprit. In the living room, the police discovered Rachel's purse, but it was missing her wallet. This led them to initially suspect a robbery. However, 2 weeks later, a crucial piece of evidence was found: a 9-inch steak knife used in the crime. It was discovered by Rachel's mother in a box in her apartment. However, the severity of the torture suggested that the perpetrator was not just a common thief, but rather someone who carefully planned their actions and took pleasure in having control over the victim. During the investigation, detectives explored various motives behind Rachel's death but struggled to identify suspects. The details of her death were kept under wraps to maintain the investigation's secrecy and prevent tipping off the perpetrator. The discovery of DNA evidence on Rachel's body and at the crime scene initially brought new hope to the investigation. However, it was ultimately unsuccessful since the DNA samples did not match any profiles in the existing database. A new clue emerged when investigators obtained video footage from street surveillance cameras. The footage showed 2 individuals using Rachel's car to drive around the city after her murder, and it was also discovered that cash had been withdrawn from her debit and credit cards. A further investigation using location services revealed a phone number that was in House Rachel's on January 28, 2018, between 7:59 p.m. and 9:25 p.m. By analyzing this evidence, authorities were able to track the location of the suspect. The investigation led to identifying the account holder linked to the phone number, ultimately revealing the suspect. The suspect was identified as 54 years old Anthony Pardon, an offender with a long history of serious crime, including multiple rapes, robbery, kidnapping, and attempted murder. Anthony had previously spent a total of 33 years in prison for these crimes. Anthony's early life was troubled. Initially, he living with grandparents, he moved to live with his mother. As a child, he received diagnoses of conduct disorder and antisocial personality disorder. In March 1979, at the age of 14, he was temporarily committed to the Ohio Youth Commission. Later that year, in July, he was placed in the custody of the court and temporarily transferred to Franklin County Children's Services. In December, Anthony was convicted of making threats and subsequently transferred to the Ohio Youth Commission, where he was placed in foster care. The following year, in 1980, Anthony, then 15 years old, was charged with abuse after assaulting the son of his foster parents. He confessed to the police that he committed the crime due to being emotionally distressed following a heated argument with his girlfriend. In another incident on November 13, 1981, 16 years old Anthony was convicted of several crimes. He had entered his girlfriend's 39 years old mother's home to use the phone, but he pulled out a butcher knife, sexually assaulted her, and stole $100 from her purse. He then gagged she, tied her hands and feet, and placed her in the trunk of his car. Anthony drove her to Valleydale, where he untied her feet and attempted to drown her in a river behind the Valleydale ballroom. However, the woman managed to stay afloat. He then got into the water and held her head underwater, but a passerby intervened and scared him away. The woman survived the assault. Anthony escaped before the police arrived and used the stolen money to purchase tennis shoes and jogging uniforms. In May 1982, in Franklin, Anthony was convicted of various crimes at the age of 17. As a result, he received a prison sentence ranging from 5 to 25 years. During his time in prison, he committed several disciplinary offenses, including possession of a prohibited weapon, setting fire to a mattress, and engaging in physical altercations. He ultimately spent over 24 years behind bars, then being released in November 2006. After his release, Anthony moved to Georgia and applied for a job under a false name. However, his freedom was short-lived. In 2007, he was charged with forgery in Floyd County and received another conviction. This led to a 9-year prison sentence, followed by 20 years of probation and the requirement to wear a GPS ankle monitor. He was released from prison in 2017 and returned to Ohio in June of that year, through an interstate agreement. Upon his return to Ohio, Anthony was placed under the supervision of the Adult Parole Authority and was required to check in with the local sheriff's department every 90 days. Unfortunately, due to budget constraints and negligence on the part of state authorities, he was able to roam free once again without adequate oversight. On August 21, 2017, he was found with lock up a woman in his car. 6 days later, he was stopped for driving without a license and was discovered to be in possession of a kitchen knife and a shotgun. Despite these incidents, he was not taken into custody. The investigation into Rachel's case continued to unfold. Security footage revealed a man getting out of Rachel's car and entering a store, while the driver remained out of sight. Police interviewed store employees and eventually identified the man as Anthony Sleets, a local homeless man. Sleets was questioned by police a couple of days later. He claimed that an older man approached him and asked for his help in cashing in his ex-girlfriend's cards. Sleets agreed, becoming an accomplice in the case. During questioning, he confirmed that the older man was Anthony Pardon and provided details of their actions on the evening of January 28, 2018, when they attempted to use Rachel's stolen cards. The next step was to find and apprehend Anthony Pardon. After several days of surveillance on Anthony's sister's house, he was finally caught on February 9, 2018. Anthony, 54 years old, with a history of offenses, was charged with 9 counts, including burglary, aggravated robbery, kidnapping, rape, and murder. The trial of Rachel Anderson's case began on February 4, 2020. On the first day, 4 witnesses took the stand, including Jonathan Kennedy, who discovered Rachel's body, and the apartment complex manager. Officer Frank Ghani also testified, describing what he saw from his car outside the complex and the surveillance footage he witnessed. Jonathan found Rachel's body, and Officer Ghani was nearby. Over the next few days, additional witnesses testified, including Anderson's brother John, Special Agent Joshua Durst on February 5, and lead detective Art Hughes on February 6. The defendant, Anthony Pardon, expressed dissatisfaction with his lawyers on February 6 and requested new lawyers. However, this was likely a delaying tactic court session by he. On February 10, the prosecution presented expert witnesses, including a latent print expert. He explained the technology used to track Rachel's debit card usage and its connection to the crime scene. Anthony's sister later took the stand and revealed that her younger brother had given her a debit card, claiming it belonged to his girlfriend. After watching a TV news report, she realized the card actually belonged to the victim, Rachel Anderson. The final day of testimony, February 11, featured crucial evidence. The medical examiner testified that Anthony's DNA was found at the crime scene. A forensic pathologist and deputy coroner from Franklin County gave detailed accounts of Rachel's injuries. Through the various testimonies, the court was provided with a detailed account of Rachel's final days. On January 26, 2018, Rachel turned 24 years old. Her brother John traveled from Warren to Columbus to celebrate with her. The following day, Rachel and her brother visited their friend, John Kennedy, where a birthday party was held in her congratulations. After the party, she and her brother spent the night at Kennedy's house. The next day, January 28, Rachel went to work, leaving the key to her apartment with her brother. However, when John returned to his hometown, he unintentionally took the key with him. Later that afternoon, around 1 o'clock, Rachel sent a text to Kennedy, asking to pick up his spare key to her apartment. Rachel spoke with her mother around 6:30 in the evening and then retrieved her key from Kennedy. After stopping for dinner, Rachel returned to her apartment at approximately 7:30 p.m. As her apartment door could only be locked from the outside with a key, it was left unlocked. Anthony abducted Anderson inside the apartment building. He took her to the top floor, where he violently restrained her using the cord from a hair dryer to tie her feet and ankles, and a belt along with blind cords to bind her hands. Once Rachel was unable to move, Anthony used a curling iron cord to restrict her wrists and prevent her from screaming. He also gagged her to further silence her. Under duress, Rachel was forced to reveal her bank card PIN numbers to her attacker. He then subjected her to torture and took advantage of her. The attack resulted in Anderson's death when he used a cord from an electric blanket to strangle them. In addition, she suffered blunt force trauma and a stab wound to the head. After committing the crime, Anthony carefully concealed Rachel's body in a closet. He left her partially naked, with the electric blanket cord wrapped around her neck and tied to the door handle. Anthony then proceeded to steal Rachel's car and used her bank cards to make multiple purchases at various stores in Columbus. The defense presented no witnesses during the trial. The final hearing took place on February 12. Assistant Prosecutor Amy Van Killen presented the state's initial argument, outlining a chronological sequence of incident and asserting to the jury that Anthony intentionally murdered Rachel brutally. In his argument, Anthony's attorney, Larry Thomas, acknowledged that his client used Rachel's credit cards but disputed Anthony's involvement in the crime. Larry argued that the prosecution's case relied on speculation and the DNA and cell phone evidence failed to prove Anthony's guilt. After roughly 6 hours of deliberation, the jury, composed of 4 men and 8 women, finding Anthony guilty on all charges. The prosecution sought the death penalty, pointing to the serious nature of the burglary and the defendant's previous conviction for a similar crime that involved attempting to kill a woman. Due to Anthony's extensive history of criminal behavior, prosecutors requested the death penalty instead of leniency. According to Prosecutor O'Brien, certain individuals consistently disregard the law, and Anthony Pardon is a prime example. The sentencing phase commenced on February 18th. In an effort to reduce the severity of the sentence, the defense highlighted Anthony's troubled childhood as a mitigating factor. However, prosecutors countered that the aggravating circumstances outweighed any mitigating factors. During the trial, it was established that Anthony was fully aware of his actions when he attacked Rachel. Despite this, several people testified in his defense, including his mother, sister, a psychologist, and his former elementary school teacher. Anthony gave an impromptu 13-minute statement to the jury. During this time, he discussed the abuse he suffered in his childhood and the hardships he faced after being released from prison, expressing feelings of helplessness. Anthony claimed that the justice system had failed him and that he received no support, ultimately blaming the system for his current circumstances. However, Anthony did not directly address the crime he committed or offer an apology for his actions. After 3.5 hours of deliberation, the jury sentenced Anthony to life imprisonment without parole. The sentencing took place on March 16, 2020. Rachel's mother was visibly emotional in court as the verdict was announced. Rachel's father felt shocked that Anthony is blaming the system for his actions, rather than taking responsibility for what happened. He acknowledged that the system does have its flaws, but in this case, it was Rachel who was ultimately let down. Judge McIntosh delivered the verdict, sentencing Anthony Pardon to life sentences without parole for aggravated murder and violence. Additionally, Anthony received 63 years in prison for various other charges, including aggravated burglary, kidnapping, and aggravated robbery. Rachel's life was tragically cut short when she passed away on her 24th birthday. At the time of her death, she was nearing the end of her internship and was close to securing a promising job. Rachel was laid to rest at Pine View Memorial Park, leaving behind her family and friends were left to cope with the unexpected and devastating loss.